I've been what some may call a wilderness expert for almost 2 decades now. I plan my trips to various forests very carefully to ensure I make it out alive. I bring all of the supplies necessary to survive for a couple of weeks in case I get lost, and I also bring a satellite phone, GPS, and a weapon as a last resort. Sometimes getting lost in the woods is part of the fun, as long as you know what you're doing, that is. The story I'm sharing with you today is of a young man who didn't take all the precautions I would recommend for a journey into an unknown forest. On my most recent expedition to Superior National Forest in Minnesota, I came across a journal hanging from a tree. There were only a few pages left in the journal. All the rest were torn out to be used for kindling as the writer addresses in the journal. The contents of this journal were very strange, and I'll touch on that later, but without further ado. My name is Anthony Lawrence. I'm a student of Bemidji State University. I don't know what the exact date is, but I first came out here on August 3rd, 2017. I think it's been around 2 weeks now. If you find this journal, you can stop looking for me. I don't have much paper left in this journal, so I'll try to keep this short. About a week before coming out here, I got a message on Facebook from some guy saying he's looking for healthy young adventurers who want to earn some money. He said he'd give me $1,000 to spend 48 hours in the woods, using whatever resources I came across to stay alive. Apparently, he was writing some kind of book about wilderness survival and wanted to see what people did with their 48 hours to stay alive. He would provide each individual with a backpack containing limited supplies and a GoPro camera to record the adventure. I used to be an Eagle Scout, so I figured sure, 2 days in the woods is nothing. And with that kind of money, I could buy a new gaming chair for my dorm and have enough left over for pizza for the whole next semester. I messaged him back and we set a time to meet. I was to bring nothing other than some sturdy clothes. He said he'd provide everything I would need to survive in the woods for the 2 days. When I met with him, he seemed like a nice enough guy, clearly very wealthy too, as he dropped me off at my spot in the forest with his personal helicopter. On the flight over, he explained that the backpack had a GPS tracking device in it so that he could find me wherever I was after the 48 hours, and he'd come pick me up. I thought it was safe to assume this guy knew what he was doing, considering all the prep work he'd put into this, so I trusted him. He dropped me off and flew away. I spent the first few minutes sorting through what I had in the backpack. There was a simple pocket knife which I stuffed into a front cargo pocket on my pants for quick access. I was given a small journal, which I also put in my cargo pants. The rest of the contents were a matchbook with 2 matches, a full bottle of water, one of those silver thermal blankets, some rope, and various other supplies you'd expect to see in a survival kit that I doubted I'd be using. Oh, and of course the GoPro, which I'd strapped to my chest. There was no map, compass, or any kind of navigational equipment. The idea, I guess, was that I was lost in the woods and had to survive. So, I set off. I spent most of the first day hiking in as straight of a path as I could manage. Other than the clearing where we landed, it was nothing but thick wooded area so far. My first goal was to find a source of water I could come back to when needed, but so far, no luck. I was dropped off in early afternoon, so at this point, it was starting to get dark and the temperature was dropping. I decided I should start setting up camp. I gathered various small branches and brush from around the area, and found a small clearing where I could start a fire without setting the whole forest ablaze. I used the tiny pocket knife to cut off smaller branches from surrounding trees, and got a decent stockpile of wood for the night. had to make use of some of the pages from this journal for kindling to get the fire started, and carefully lit one of the 2 matches I had to get it going. So far, so good. I took out the thermal blanket and laid down to sleep next to the fire. I awoke before the rise of the sun. The fire was just a mess of ash at this point, and I didn't want to waste my other match so early getting another fire started, so I packed everything up and set off again. After several more hours of hiking, I finally heard something that was music to my ears. Running water. A stream. At this point, my water bottle was nearly empty, so I was ecstatic that I'd be able to finish it off and refill. 2 days out here for $1,000? Easiest money I've ever made. I followed the sound of the water to a small stream that seemed to go for quite a way. After filling my bottle, I decided to follow the stream in the direction it was flowing from, ideally to find a lake or something. I still had plenty of daylight left, so I kept going. I was getting pretty hungry at this point, so it'd be nice to find a lake with some fish in it. But even in the worst case scenario, I could last 2 days without food, no problem. It was getting dark again, and the stream I was following was getting wider, but still no lake in sight. I should have just set up camp right there when I still had daylight. But I was determined to find this lake and kept going. After a couple more hours, it was just too dark to continue. There was some moonlight shining through the leaves above, but not much. Not enough to keep following the stream. So I did the best I could to gather up some more wood for another fire in the dark of the night and set up a makeshift campground again. I started the fire with pages from the journal for kindling again and used my last match. I hunkered down and went to sleep, excited to find this lake the following morning and get some food before the guy picked me up to go back home. Loud cracking woke me up in the middle of the night. Branches breaking from all around me. I sprang to my feet, startled. I wasn't sure what kind of wildlife was out here, but it could very well be bears or wolves. Adrenaline began pumping through my body, and I tried to listen for where the sounds were coming from, but I could barely hear over my heartbeat. I had to do something, though. I couldn't just stand here like an idiot waiting to be eaten. Whatever kind of animal this was, I felt like I'd be safer if I could climb one of these trees. As the cracking of branches grew closer and louder, I began to climb a big pine tree near me. With plenty of branches making it easy enough to climb, the fire was dying down pretty quickly, but I had enough residual light to start the climb. I got up 1, 2, 3, 4 branches, probably about 6 feet from the ground, when the noises stopped. So I stopped too. I strained my ears to listen, but again, it was difficult to hear over my heartbeat. I sat there for what seemed like an eternity, 2 of my hands gripping adjacent branches above, one of my feet supporting me, and the other foot hanging freely. Nothing but silence around me now. I thought maybe whatever it was had gone, and that I was safe. I adjusted my grip on the tree when the branch my foot was on broke off. I lost my grip on the branches above. I fell backwards and hit my head on the hard ground below, knocking me unconscious. I don't know how long I was out, but when I awoke, it was still dark, even darker than before it seemed. I wasn't on the ground where I'd landed, though. I was on a flat surface, like a table. I tried to sit up and look around, but I couldn't move. I realized then that my hands and feet were bound to this table. I panicked, flexing every muscle in my body, trying to get free from this trap. I screamed, What the fuck? Over and over again. As I struggled, I heard what sounded like voices all around me. But I could not discern what the voices were saying. I thought I was alone out here. I was literally out in the middle of nowhere. Who the fuck is strapping people down in the middle of the forest? I continued to convulse my body, feeling the bindings that were holding me down loosen ever so slightly. That's when shit got really scary, though. I don't know if I was drugged or what, but really crazy stuff started to happen. I heard a loud thumping noise. I heard branches breaking. No, trees. Entire trees being snapped in half from the sound of it. Something was getting closer to me. The voices around me got louder. Something like some kind of chanting. I quickly realized that this was some kind of sacrifice. Maybe this was all in my head. I really don't know. The absurdity of it all makes it difficult for me to believe that whatever was happening was real. The thumping and cracking of the wood grew louder and louder, until I could finally make out some kind of silhouette against the backdrop of the woods in front of me, barely illuminated by the moonlight. It was huge. Whatever it was impossibly huge. I was freaking out like I'd never freaked out before. I screamed as I continued to try to get free of the bindings holding me down. As I watched the forest being torn down in front of me, the chanting from the voices growing louder and louder. The beast was probably 100 yards away from me when I realized I'd gotten one of my hands loose. My face was a mess of tears and snot from crying, which I hadn't realized I'd been doing until now. I broke my hand free and quickly wiped away at my face before getting to work on the other bindings. Once I had that hand free, I was able to make quick work of the other bindings. I got my other hand free, and the creature let out a deafening roar. The chanting voices around me stopped. I hastened my pace and shakily got to work on the bindings on my feet. After a mere couple of seconds, I was free of these as well. I sprang up from the table and began to run. I fell over almost immediately. I was incredibly dizzy. They had to have drugged me. I got back up and continued to run away from the beast. I could still hear the forest being torn down behind me, but I did not turn around to look. I just kept running, struggling to overcome the dizziness and keep upright. Whatever this thing was, it was either very slow or just didn't care enough to pursue me. After a few minutes of running, I could no longer hear the creature, the breaking of the trees, or the chanting voices. But I did not stop. I could not stop. Even if the creature didn't continue in my pursuit, chances are the source of those voices would not let their sacrifice get away that easily. Eventually, I saw the sun rising on the horizon, and I figured I'd been running for long enough. I stopped, leaned back against a tree, and slouched to the ground. I was so scared and in so much pain from the fall from the tree. The bindings on my hands and feet, the tumble to the ground when I got free, and all of the thorns and shit I ran through during my escape. I put my head between my legs and sobbed uncontrollably. Once I was done with my episode, I wiped my face with my shirt and assessed the situation. I no longer had the backpack or the GoPro. In my cargo pockets, I still had the small pocket knife. I wish I'd realized sooner that I still had this. And this journal. But that was all. I almost had a psychotic break when I realized that without the backpack, the guy who brought me here had no way of finding me. I had to get myself together and figure out what I was going to do. The stream I was following the previous night was nowhere near. I had no idea where I was in relation to the stream, my starting point, or even the sacrificial area I'd just run from. I was lost to begin with, but now I was really lost. They say if you get lost in the woods, you should stay where you're at so that you're not continually running away from whatever search parties they may send to find you. But I could not do that. Not with whatever that creature was out there, and the cultists or whatever they were that were helping it. I had to keep moving, and I had to come up with a plan on how I was going to get that backpack back. After a few minutes of collecting myself, I stood up and began to walk. I didn't know where I was going, but I figured I had like a 50% chance of finding my starting point, the cultist area, or the stream I was following, if I just kept walking. It was a few hours yet to the 48-hour mark, so he'd have to come looking for me soon. Maybe if I heard the helicopter, I could signal him somehow. I walked for hours, and everything was still so unfamiliar. The sun was at its highest point, but still, no sound of a helicopter. I don't even know how far those people brought me from where I was at. I could be miles away from where I thought I was. I kept walking all day. Eventually, it was getting dark again. And I was still lost. I had no supplies. All I had was my pocket knife and my journal. Well, one thing I learned in my time in Boy Scouts was how to start a fire by rubbing a couple of sticks together. So I took out my pocket knife and got to work on gathering wood. I knew I wouldn't be sleeping tonight. It was too risky, but at least I had to keep warm. After probably an hour of rubbing a couple of sticks together, I never really had the patience to get this to work before, I finally got the fire going. I had to use more pages from the journal to keep the fire started. So at this point, I figured I needed to conserve the pages. I didn't know how long I was going to be out here. As I anticipated, I didn't sleep at all. I just sat by the campfire all night, trying to keep the flames small as to not draw any unwanted attention. Nothing ever came to bother me, though. Morning came, and I've been out here almost 3 days now. I was overcome with hunger and thirst. If I was to be out here for a while, I absolutely had to find that stream again. I tried to remember which way I was walking for those first 2 days, based on the position of the sun. I think I figured it out and started walking the opposite direction, perpendicular to the way I'd been walking the day before. I walked all the way in that direction, and still nothing. So I set up camp and actually slept a little bit that night. The next day, I finally found some water. I don't know if it was the same stream I saw before, but it didn't matter. At least I'd be able to survive a little longer. I brought my face down to the stream and gulped directly from it like an animal. I was amazed at how much I was able to drink and how satisfying it was. I used some of the water to wash my face and feet and set off to follow the stream to its source. I followed the stream for several days. I didn't want to stray too far from it, as it was the only thing really keeping me alive. Eventually, though, I came across a larger portion of the stream where I saw several frogs and tadpoles. I was fucking starving at this point. I didn't care how disgusting it was. I was going to eat these frogs. So that's what I did. I started a small fire using the same technique that I was starting to get pretty good at, and I cooked some frogs and ate them. People say it tastes like chicken, and, well, they're not wrong. I continued this route of following the stream for the next couple days, and it was getting wider. I was starting to think that I found my way out again. And my theory was confirmed when I saw the ashes of my fire from the second night. Luckily, I had daylight to work with this time. This is where I fell from the tree. They had took me away somewhere. I'm not an expert tracker by any means, but there were definitely signs of broken branches that I was able to follow. Hopefully to where they brought me to. I followed this trail for a long, long time. And when I was starting to think I wasn't going to find what I was looking for, I saw it. I saw an opening in the forest where the beast had come through. I saw the table where they strapped me down. I kept my distance, assessing the area. I didn't see any signs of human or animal life. But if they took my backpack, it had to be near here. This brings me to now. I'm writing all of this down just in case I fail. And if I don't get the backpack, I'm going to hang this journal from a nearby tree. If I don't come back for it, that probably means that whatever is in these woods has killed me. And like I said, you can stop looking. Whatever that thing was, if it wasn't in my imagination, I have no doubt that it could have killed me without much trouble. If you're reading this, I am definitely dead. And that's all there was. There were no more blank pages to write on if he wanted to. He had used up the rest of these pages for kindling, I guess. I searched around the area I found the journal to see if I could find any evidence of his encounters, but I don't see any cavities in the forest from a large creature, and I don't see any kind of table he might have been bound to. There's no signs that any of this actually happened from what I can tell. The date he wrote down was 2 years ago, so I did some research. As I mentioned earlier, there was something really strange about all this. And I'm not talking about the creature he described. It's likely that the knock on his head had him confused, and his mind was filling in the blanks for something that didn't really happen. I looked him up on Google first, and found a missing persons report from August 2017. So he definitely existed. And this wasn't just some prank journal that someone left in the woods. Then I looked him up on Facebook. His last Facebook post said, "Going camping for a couple of days, won't have service, talk to you all soon." So he didn't really tell people what he was doing. I got a hold of the boy's family and gave them this journal. I tried to get more information from them. Obviously, this was very hard for them to take in. But curiosity got the better of me, and I had to know more. I convinced them to sign into their son's Facebook account, which they were able to get into as his password was saved on his home computer, and to look for the messages he had talked about in the journal. We found the messages he described in the journal from the guy offering $1,000. Only thing is, this guy was a ghost. He never existed. His name didn't turn up any results. And if it truly was a wilderness survival guide author, I would for sure have found something. But no. It all seemed like some kind of scam. Whoever this guy was, he actually convinced this kid to go into the woods by himself, promising to pick him up after 2 days, likely with no intention to actually follow through. How many kids did he do this to? Was there actually some kind of cult out there he was working with, bringing them sacrifices? Well, hopefully the police will be able to find something out. I doubt I'll ever hear the results of their findings, but I really hope they find this guy. And lastly, I'll leave you with a little piece of advice. Never go out into the woods alone, especially without any kind of communications or navigation equipment. And for the love of God, let someone know where you're going.
I'm not gonna lie. I had a great childhood. I had loving parents. I still do. I got along with my sister. All of my family took care of me and brought me up the best way they could. Most of them were university teachers and researchers, so I also had a pretty big bank of knowledge at my disposal. We never had too much money since my country was going through a pretty bad economic crisis during my younger years. But it was enough to get us a nice little house next to my grandparents, my old man's mom and dad. We were always extremely close. I loved knitting and taking care of the garden with my grandma and watched football matches and carpentering with my grandpa. My school days went pretty smoothly. I didn't have the best grades, but they were good enough. So at 18, when I finally finished high school and managed to get into a good college, my grandparents decided that they were going to give me a pretty amazing gift. I was going to spend a month with them traveling through Spain. For the most part, I had a good time, as expected. The trip bonded us even further, and I loved every minute of our time, seeing beautiful art and architecture. But none of that mattered, compared to what happened in a single, fateful night. I have denied and shrugged off the memories for an unbearably long time, but something made me remember, and nothing will ever be the same again. I probably will never, ever again forgot what I went through. No matter how hard I try to block them out of my life again, the memories will consume me. This is why I must tell my story before it is lost forever. It all started during the third week of the trip. We had already visited Madrid, Segovia, and Toledo. Next up was Granada, home of La Alhambra, the most lavish of the Arab palaces in the Iberian Peninsula. It had been the final bastion of resistance of the last Moorish king, where he spent the final days of his reign, a fairy tale town. Too bad it was filled to the last inch with tourists. We were standing at a hotel called Leonardo. I remember that we arrived at night at about 8 p.m. after a 4-hour-long train trip. The lobby was pretty nicely decorated and shiny, and the staff was nice, so we weren't expecting in the least bit what we were going to find upstairs. It was a pretty tall building for Granadan standards. We were staying in the second to last floor, the 10th if I remember correctly. This meant that we had a good view of the whole city, and that was pretty much the only good thing about the place. The corridor leading to our room was old and musty, covered in a pink and peach-striped wallpaper that had suffered a few decades of constant humidity, probably from a leaking pipe. It had a low ceiling with a long row of dim lights and a carpeted floor with a grayish hue to it that had probably once been beige. The room itself wasn't too different, with the added discomfort of an old bathroom, stained bed sheets, and an old springy mattress that could have been at least twice my age. Nothing like what we had seen in the pictures. Nonetheless, we were more interested in the city itself than the boring old hotel, so we unpacked as quickly as we could and went out for a nocturnal bite and a short walk. Before going out, though, we complained to one of the receptionists about the state of our room. He politely explained this particular hotel had passed through several owners and hotel chains, like an old hand-me-down that no one really wanted, but accepted anyway. Apparently, the owners had only bothered to refurbish the lobby and left the rest of the building just as they found it. Fair enough. The hotel staff had nothing to do with the owner's carelessness. Plus, we had already paid for our stay and did not have the time nor the will to find another place. So we had our supper, got the feel of the town, and came back at about 11. The first night was surprisingly not bad. We were completely exhausted from the long train ride and wanted nothing more than to get our fair share of sleep. And that we did. I woke up after a dreamless night. I hadn't even noticed the hardness of the old mattress. I felt great. It all started when we were getting ready to leave our room that morning. It was 9:10 when we heard a low knocking on the door, and then there came the voice. "Cleaning service." It was an old lady's voice, with a deep Spanish accent. I opened the door and let her in. I gazed at her while she greeted us with a good morning in barely understandable English. She was a very peculiar old woman. Her wrinkled skin was rather pale, but it was covered in brown stains from years of exposure to the sun. Her hands looked rugged and calloused, roughened by years of hard work. She had deep, teary green eyes that contrasted with her silky black mane. I couldn't help but stare at it. Her hair looked so soft that it could have belonged to a 10-year-old. Only the odd gray hair gave it away. We finished grabbing our things and were about to get out, when I suddenly remembered that I'd forgotten to grab my wallet. I told my grandparents to meet me downstairs and went back in the room. Quickly, I searched for the wallet on the nightstand, but it wasn't there. I was reaching under the bed when suddenly the woman said, "Don't worry, I already picked it up." She reached out her hand. I thanked her and took the wallet, and as I did, our skin touched. Her skin felt damp and cold, too cold. For an instant, it felt as if the body had been filled up with melted ice. A sudden urge to get the old lady out of my sight as fast as possible grew inside me. So I quickly said goodbye and practically ran out of the room. But as I was closing the door, I felt the coldness grow inside me once again and turned around. The cleaning lady was staring directly into my eyes, smiling a knowing smile. The smile said that she was in on the joke, and I was not. I slammed the door shut. For the rest of the day, I had the old woman in the back of my mind. Every time I zoned out, I would remember that seemingly unexplained coldness I had felt deep in my bones. To my great satisfaction, though, I still managed to have a good time. I had managed to convince myself of the irrationality of being scared by a simple old lady. I was such a wuss. But by the time we returned to the hotel that night, I was crossing my fingers in hopes that I wouldn't have to see that woman ever again. My grandparents decided that they were going to stay at the 24-hour lobby bar for a while to grab some tea, but I decided to go straight to our room. I was ready to sleep tight and get ready for one more final tourist's day of non-stop walking in Granada. It wasn't to be. Before getting in bed, I got the sudden urge to have a hot shower. It had been a long day and I deserved it. It was a long shower. While the water flowed through my hair, I thought about how happy the three of us were, and of all the pictures and postcards where we were going to bring back home. But then the cleaning lady came into my mind once again, and I started to get anxious. Why hadn't my grandparents come up yet? I was about to grab a towel and get out, when I heard a loud bang. The lights suddenly went out, and the water got cold. A power failure. Oh well. I should have expected it from a building in such bad conditions. Naked, wet, and in the dark, I blindly reached for my phone and turned on my flashlight. It was exactly 12 o'clock. Why hadn't my grandparents come back? I wrapped the towel around my waist and reached for the door handle while holding my phone in the other hand. The door didn't budge. I tried harder, but nothing happened. The door was stuck. What terrible timing. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. Great, my grandparents had come. "Grandma? Grandpa? Are you there?" I called out. No answer. I called out again. Still no reply. I started to get anxious. If it wasn't my grandparents, then who the hell was in our room? And what reason would they have to not reply to my calls? The footsteps continued. I tried the handle again and was about to try to slam my body against the door, but luckily thought twice before doing it. If the person that had come in my room didn't want me to open the door, was it a good idea to confront him? After all, if he was armed, the encounter could get me badly hurt or worse. So I locked the bathroom door on my side as a safety measure and decided to call 911, but then I remembered that I didn't have any service. I hadn't bothered to buy a phone chip for the trip, so I tried the internet, but of course, it had gone out along with the electricity. I was getting desperate. The footsteps continued outside the room for a few seconds, and suddenly, I froze. The footsteps were nearing the bathroom door. This was getting out of hand. And then I heard it. The knocking. Only one thought filled my mind. The cleaning lady. Everything hit me all at once. I felt her outside my door. It was the same agonizingly cold, wet feeling from that morning, but way, way worse. It was the same feeling you get when that freezing early winter rain hits you hard on the face, but deep, deep inside your bones. And there was dread, too. Bucket loads of dread filling my heart. What could she possibly want from me? Was that thing outside the bathroom door even a she? It was too much, and so I froze. My knees turned to rubber and I collapsed into the corner. Unthinking and unmoving, I was knocked out of my state of trance by a sudden bang. The woman, or should I say, creature, that stood outside the bathroom had grown tired of knocking. It banged on the door, harder and louder this time. The door wasn't holding much longer. At this point, the adrenaline had kicked in. I placed my phone on the counter, grabbed the toilet's ceramic lid, and got ready to hit whatever monster came through the door. Suddenly, the door opened violently. What was standing right in front of me did not look like a monster. There was no mistaking what I managed to see from the dim glow coming from my phone's flashlight. It was the cleaning lady, all right, but she looked nothing like what I had seen that morning. Her perfectly black hair had grown longer. It was so long that it spread around the floor like spilled water. She stood naked and still, right at the door, looking straight at me, unblinking. What I saw when I looked at her eyes made me grow still, letting the adrenaline fade away and the coldness and dread take me once again. They were not the deep green shade from earlier that day anymore. In fact, they weren't any color at all. They were white, completely white. A pair of colorless, lifeless balls. Then she started walking towards me, in a perfect line, as if she were being guided by a vector. I dropped my weapon. It was the least human walk I'd ever witnessed. It was as if a creature, some unknown, dark being, had put on a suit and was trying and failing to look like a member of our species. The beast in the old woman's body walked in the same otherworldly fashion until it got right next to me and opened its mouth, revealing a set of perfectly white teeth. I was completely paralyzed. It opened its mouth so wide that its jaw started to crunch and its skin to tear. A gray liquid started to pour from its throat. In that moment, I realized what it was about to do. I felt it in my gut. It was going to take a bite. It was going to feed. Yet I couldn't move. The coldness just wouldn't let me. Then there was another feeling. Acceptance. My body had given up to the creature. I was to be a part of it. A new skin for its collection, just like the one it was wearing right now. Out of nowhere, I heard a second bang from somewhere in the building, and light filled my eyes. The power was back. I blinked for the first time in what felt like a million years, and when I opened my eyes, there was nothing in front of me. It was gone. I closed my eyes for one last time that night. The next time I opened them, I was no longer in the bathroom corner. I was laying in my bed the next morning. It was as if absolutely nothing had happened. Had it all been a terrifyingly real nightmare? That is what my body led me to believe. As a coping mechanism, my brain made me forget. It made me think of the events of that night as mere products of my imagination. And it worked. The rest of the trip went by just as expected. I came home just as expected and continued on with my life just as expected. This was 4 years ago. Every time I came close to thinking about the events of that dreadful night, a cerebral mist clouded my memory. 2 days ago, something clicked. Something that made everything come back to me. It was as if a ticking time bomb had been planted that night in my brain, just waiting for the right time to explode. One night, out of nowhere, I started to dream. My first dream was a perfect recollection of that terrible night, ending just seconds before I succumbed to the creature. Ever since, I had been blanking out several times a week, losing track of time and forgetting whole parts of my day. Spans of several hours have been getting blurry. But the worst part of my day is nighttime, when everything comes back to me. A dream of coldness, of death. Sometimes I can see people, scared people, a dark being always closing in on them, but they can't move, can't run. The cold won't let them. I never got to see the end of those nightmares. Not that I needed to. I have considered several times visiting a psychiatrist, but I don't think it'll do any good. And I'm pretty sure I know why, even if I don't want to say or think it. I have since come to terms with my fate and the inevitability of the truth, so I'll tell it to you as a final goodbye. I think that night in Granada, I might not have escaped the monster after all.
As a kid, I lived with neglectful parents at best. At worst, Dad would turn his screams and fists on me, but I've learned quickly how to dodge the worst of it. Mom wasn't much help. She'd just smoke in the kitchen and bitch at him for staying out so late. At the time, we basically lived in the middle of nowhere. Our nearest neighbor were a long walk away for a 6-year-old, and we had trees between us. No one to run to for help. But I was a pretty small kid at my age. I learned that I could fit pretty much anywhere. The closet, dryer. I think even once I tucked myself under the futon in such a way I could still get some air, but no one could see me. I was a master at hiding, but not for a good reason. One night I chose to do something different. I could hear my dad's yells. He was pissed and was about to get violent. Mom wasn't helping either, just piling fuel onto the inferno of a flame. I knew I had to find a good hiding spot. I had gotten an idea a few days before when I realized that the lattice covering the bottom half of our porch had a hole in it. Not big enough to fit a full-grown man, most likely, but I could fit my skinny 6-year-old in there no problem. So wrapping myself in my blanket and grabbing my hippo stuffy, I snuck out the window and ran into the backyard. In the middle of autumn, when it was 40 degrees out and temperatures were steadily dropping. I crawled under the porch, scraping my elbow and getting splinters in my palms, but I fit inside. It was actually quite spacious compared to most of my hiding spots. I couldn't sit up all the way, but I had plenty of room to spread out my limbs. Of course, I was getting covered in dirt. It had rained a few days ago, so the mud was still a little wet. I wrapped myself in my blankie the best I could, and settled in for the night. But soon, even with my blankie and my hippo, My teeth were chattering so hard, and I could barely breathe. I didn't want to go back inside, knowing that if my dad caught me, I'd be in for the whipping of my life. So I just toughed it out. "Honey, are you cold?" The voice was not the voice of my mother, scratchy from all the smoking and screeching she did. It was sweet, like honey. I turned over to see a dim outline of a woman lying on her stomach next to me. She had a pretty butterfly necklace and was dirty like I was. I nodded, not wondering how she'd been down there without me noticing. The woman belly crawled forward and wrapped her arms around me, and I suddenly became warm, like I was sitting next to a campfire. I snuggled in her arms, not minding the mud. After all, we were both dirty. "You've gotten so big," the woman said, examining my face. "How old are you now, Alex?" 6. How did I know this woman again? I didn't think I did. 6? The woman gasped. "You're all grown up then. I'm so happy." She sighed pleasantly and stroked my hair. I had never felt so cozy in my life. "What's your name?" I asked. She smiled. I could hear it in her voice. "I'm Lily. What's your favorite things to do?" I had to think for a second. "I like board games and coloring." Lily chuckled. "Just like me then. Could never get enough of Scrabble. But I guess you're still young to play that, huh?" I nodded. "I want to play it though. I like the tiles. Would you play with me?" I heard Lily sharply inhale. I don't think I can. Your daddy put me under here, and I can't leave, but..." She thought for a second. "Alex, could you do me a favor?" "Of course." This lady was so nice, why wouldn't I do her a favor? "When you wake up in the morning, go to the police station. Ask for the officer named Lowell Joyce. Tell him where you can find Lily, okay? Underneath your back porch. He will come and get me, okay? And then maybe we can play Scrabble." Yippee! I was too excited at the possibility of playing Scrabble to notice how Lily's voice caught at the end. I nodded vigorously. "I'll do it. We can be on the same team, right?" Lily softly laughed. "I'll help you understand the rules. Good night, Alex." When I woke up the next morning, I heard Lily's voice. "Go now. Your dad's gone at work. I'll tell you how to get to the station." Rubbing my eyes, I crawled out from underneath the porch and went to my house to grab my shoes and coat. I shivered in the frosty cold, but I thought Lily was right behind me. After my shoes and coat were on, I started walking. It was long enough to get to the neighbor's house. I can't remember how long it took to get to the police station. Although I have no idea why no one pulled over to see what the hell a 6-year-old in his dirty pajamas was doing walking alongside the road. But Lily kept guiding me onward. "Wait. Okay, cross the street now. Turn right here. Keep going. You've almost made it." I nearly collapsed with exhaustion by the time I walked into the station. The guys were in the front chatting and having a good time and didn't see me until I was almost at the front desk. "Whoa, kid. You okay?" One of the officers knelt down to my level, eyes wide. I nodded. "I'm okay. Can I speak to Lowell Joyce?" One of the officers picked me up. "Sure, kid. Sure. Let's go get you someplace warm." Holy shit, your lips are blue. I remember quietly scolding the man to watch his language. Shit was a bad word. I was given some warm cocoa and wrapped up in a blanket by the time the old man with a graying mustache sat by me. "Hey kid, I'm Sheriff Joyce. What's your name?" "Alex." I sat down my cup and looked him straight in the eye. "I was told to tell you that Lily is under my back porch. You need to go and let her out so she could play Scrabble." I had never seen a grown man turn pale before. Lots of things blurred together at that point. I remember being taken back to my house, and there were a lot of police cars and people around. The back porch was surrounded by yellow tape, and someone was taking a black bag away while my dad was in handcuffs. After that, I lived with my grandparents, which were Sheriff Joyce and his wife. I tried to ask him what happened and who Lily was, but I always got shut down. I was too young to know. But life got better, a lot better. Grandpa was the best man I could have hoped for in my life. We went out on weekends, to the movies, where he let me have a giant soda, even though I had to pee in the middle of the movie. When I asked him if I could drink when I was 13, he let me try beer. I spat it out and didn't touch it again. He never judged me for my love of art, letting me paint my whole bedroom multiple times over the years. I felt safe around him. He never laid a hand on me. My grandmother was amazing too. Over the week she would homeschool me, along with teaching me things that you wouldn't learn in school, such as how to respect others and not to take their crap. And cooking, lots of cooking. I could make my own birthday cake by the time I was 12, but I usually made them for my friends. I had a lot of those after I was free from my dad. When I turned 16, Grandpa took me back to my dad's house. The whole thing had been bulldozed over, but I could still see some yellow tape wound around a few of the trees, faded and torn. We sat on the back of his truck. He had opened a beer and drank half of it before setting it down and grabbing me an orange soda. After I drank it, he told me, "Lily was your mother." Good thing he didn't tell me when I was drinking. I would have had it coming out of my nose. "My mom?" I questioned, confused. "Your actual mom. The woman that you lived with your dad was not your mother." My granddad grabbed another beer. "Lily was my daughter. I loved her so much. But when you were around 6 months old, she vanished." My stomach dropped. "My dad just imprisoned her under the porch?" I asked, starting to feel sick. Grandpa took another deep breath before setting the unopened beer down. "That's something I'll never be able to understand. Lily told you to find me and that she loved Scrabble?" "Yeah. She kept me warm that night. I would have probably frozen to death if she hadn't been there." I was a stupid kid, even I knew that. Grandpa went dead quiet before he opened the beer and slammed the whole thing. "Alex, Lily had been dead the whole time she was gone. When we dug her up, she was bones. Experts confirmed it, and your dad confessed what happened. They had gotten into a fight and he threw her down the stairs, and she broke her neck." He clenched his fist. "I knew he had something to do with her disappearance, but I never had proof until you walked into my station, covered in dirt, telling me that she was under your porch." I was floored. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was shake my head. "But I saw her. She was alive. She had a butterfly necklace." I trailed off, and Grandpa pulled out the evidence baggie from his pocket. There was a butterfly necklace, all right, rusty and parts of the paint chipped off. But I remembered it clearly, as I remembered Lily's voice. Grandpa took a shaky breath as he pressed the bag into my hands. "Lily loved you so much. It's why she stuck around with that bastard. You were her whole world. She was constantly taking pictures of you and sending them to us in the mail. Sometimes a mother's love can accomplish things that no humans can do." My eyes overflowed with tears as I clutched the necklace to my chest, choking on sobs. I leaned against my grandpa. He held me tight, and I swear I felt a few of his tears hit the top of my head. And just for a brief moment, I swear I felt the warm love I felt that night under the porch. I worked in security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules and things employees can't put online, but I just don't think I could tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20, I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters, and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there would be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere else, with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better, as far as the climate and the comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestic. I guess the expensive and stress of a vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom or dad were yelling at each other. I would try to suggest that they would take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I still have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently a couple days before that, housekeeping had went to a room that should have been turned over that day. Turnover is when a guest leaves about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. But when housekeeping arrived, all of the guest items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next few days, when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to go check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything that a family would need on vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family. A dad, mom, and 2 little kids. I tried calling the phone number that they had given us, but all I got was voicemail. We were all stumped, so I made the call that the housekeeper should clean the room and that we would take all the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all their stuff. I found out that the family had paid a parking fee on their vehicle. Description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots, and I easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out that they got in a car accident, or them just deciding to leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day that they arrived, they got here late and probably stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits in Epcot. The second park day, they used just 1 credit at the Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney, there's something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by guests, and they act like a room key, a parking ticket, a credit card, dining reservation payment, and a fast pass, which is a system used to bypass a line. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day that they had went to the Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride, It's a Small World, around 11 a.m., then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring someone else in on this. I called a co-worker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he had found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed me them scanning their bands to use the fast pass for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage on the exit of the ride just showed the other people in the car exiting. They weren't there. Of course we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and the mom and dad and the other kid had gotten off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in the machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride. Middle of the damn day. We turned off all the music and turned up all the lights. Me and my buddy walked the ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there were close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was stumped. I've kept digging for the past couple days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found to next. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on their way. But the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some sort of warning. I kept digging into the reservation over the last couple days, and today, and I noticed that they had purchased a memory maker. There are photographers all over the parks, and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with a memory maker, these photos are all free. They automatically get added to each guest's Disney account when the system sees that their picture has been taken, and the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up the Memory Maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so were pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides, in front of the castle, but the rest were all in It's a Small World. The ride only takes one picture per go-around, so it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty, except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 or 15, I can see the dad getting angry and yelling. The mom is holding on to those two kids like her life depended on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in the damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely, I can see the dad. Maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just the mom and one kid. Another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think that they are still alive, just damn near catatonic, looking straight ahead, pale. And I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures I can tell that they aren't where they should be. I even saw one of the dolls in the car with a family. I can't look anymore, or I'm gonna lose my lunch. I close the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on the security camera that the local PD has just arrived and they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck was going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed on my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I'm gonna walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to where the family vanished to. They didn't vanish. I know where they are.
When I was younger, my mom was dating this guy, who we'll call BJ, and after a few months, he invited my mom and our family out to the lake house that BJ's grandfather built back in the day, up on Lake Michigan. One of the perks of this beach house was that it was in a secluded area and that there was no one else near this beach. As we were staying at the lake house, we decided to all go down to the lake and have a good time. Before we went down to the lake, BJ suggested that me and my brother go up into the attic and find some beach toys that we could play with down at the lake. As we entered the attic, we realized that most of the items that were up in the attic were actually BJ's grandparents, whose profession at the time were tailors. So we weren't completely shocked when we found 8 mannequins in the corner. Next to the mannequins were the beach toys that BJ was referring to. We quickly grabbed the toys and went down and thought nothing more of the experience with the mannequins in the attic. The rest of our stay was kind of odd. My brother and I began to notice that we would hear footsteps late at night in the attic. That very night, I had a very peculiar dream. I had a dream that I woke up and went to the bathroom to get some water. On my way back, I noticed that in the kitchen, some of the mannequins were standing and staring at me. I woke up the next day and completely forgot about my dream that I had the night prior. We packed up and got everything ready to leave when my brother and I decided to take one more trip down to the lake. On our way down to the lake, we saw some people down at the beach. We were really confused, but we were really excited since we had some more people to play with. As we got closer to the beach and a better look at the people, we suddenly realized that the people were in fact mannequins. My brother and I thought this was really weird considering that we had not seen any people down at the beach the whole weekend, and that we were at the exact spot yesterday and the mannequins weren't there. My brother and I quickly turned around and ran back to the lake house. Upon returning, we quickly told BJ and my mom what we saw down at the beach. BJ's face turned a ghostly white. My mom then asked me how many mannequins were down there. And before I could answer, BJ said, 3. We all turned to BJ in surprise. BJ then quickly told us the story of how when his grandparents died, that they tried to remove some of the items from the attic. He told us that when he threw out the mannequins, that they would all appear back into the attic sometime within the next week. For some reason, BJ would find 3 of the 8 mannequins placed randomly throughout the property. He also told us that as long as we didn't touch them, that everything should be fine, and that we would never be hurt by the mannequins. After the lake trip, my mom and BJ dated for about 4 more months, and they decided to break up.
A fear of mirrors. It's pretty weird. Maybe even a little pathetic. Everyone uses them or any sort of clear reflected surface every single day. So why am I afraid of them? I guess that's why you call it irrational. You hear all these superstitions that ghosts can contact you through mirrors. Mirrors show your inner self. You can see things through them. And other sorts of stuff. For me, it's not the surface of the mirror itself, or really my own reflection. The fear resides in what lies behind them. What's there when I look away for even a second? What's my reflection doing when I turn away? Why do I find myself smiling when I look into my own eyes? I've tried my best to get over my fear, but to no avail. In fact, it only got worse the more I tried. I keep seeing myself smiling. Just a shit-eating grin staring back at my own blank face. If I stare for too long, I disassociate. It feels like my mind bounces itself off the mirror's surface, only to knock me in the head. Like it's trying to pull me through. Like it's silently beckoning me to go through. It's extremely unsettling, and it's even worse in the dark. I've been really thinking about my phobia and trying to piece together where it started and why it did. I know it started when I was about 13, and it was after an attempt to end it all. But I don't exactly know how. Maybe it's because one of the last things I looked at before I blacked out and started hallucinating was myself in a mirror. And this is all some sort of PTSD thing. I personally don't think it's psychological. That's just what my therapist thinks. I think there's something more behind it. I took a variety of street drugs, painkillers, and various prescription meds that mostly weren't prescribed to me. My stomach was never pumped. No one in my family took me to a hospital. I was just sitting on the floor against my bed, sitting in my own vomit. I was semi-conscious for a good hour or 2 in the beginning. Then all of a sudden, it was nothing. I don't remember closing my eyes or anything. No smell, sight, touch, taste, or sound. Just darkness for what felt like an hour tops. I woke up in my bed with no one around me, but in new clothes. Checked my phone and saw that it was about 10 hours after I took those drugs. I remember waking up to the smell of burning skin with no actual source. I wanted to explain what happened to me, not for some lame pity party, but to say that I think I did die that day. Somewhere along the line of that drug-induced sleep, I died and was somehow resuscitated. Our brains tend to block out trauma as a sort of defense mechanism. So maybe what I saw in the mirrors and why I'm so afraid of them is because I'm seeing some weird manifestation of a repressed memory when I died. Or maybe I'm just delusional. There is one last thing I'd like to mention, however. Ever since then, things have been following me. Silently and always out of my vision. But sometimes if I'm fast enough, I can see them in the corner of my eye. They watch me, and they like to creep into my dreams as well. I see them in the reflection of my own eyes when I look into a mirror. Just shadows, always standing behind me. Maybe I should have mentioned that last part sooner, huh? I've never been good at explaining things. I tend to always forget one detail that makes everything seem fake, even if I can swear up and down it's true. When I was 5 years old, it seemed my mother had disappeared without a trace. My father had told me she found another man and left. Your mother is an evil woman. I wish I could say that she loved you, but she didn't, he often told me. He was a single father caring for his only child, who often got into trouble. It must have been hard on him, and so he began to start sneaking away into the attic. At first it didn't bother me. I remember once I had tried to sneak into the attic, but a mouse had scared me away from the door. My father, being the brave man he was, caught the damn thing and made his way into the attic, carrying the dead mouse. Now that I think about it, what an odd thing to do. There was nothing but garbage in the attic, from what I last remembered. But I suppose, since he'd been going into the attic a bit more often now at this point, there could have been a trash can in there. As the years passed, I found my father spending more and more time in that damn attic. Didn't he care about me? I was his little girl, and I was becoming irritated at the fact of how little he paid attention to me. There was one time when I had made up my mind to confront my father, and so I made my way up to the creaking spiral staircase. Upon my arrival at the door, I could hear my father's faint crying. I then had noticed the empty beer bottles by the door. I had been so ready to confront him, but instead, I turned away from the door. I felt sorry for that man, scolding myself for wanting to do such a thing to him. I was only going to stress him out more. I at the time felt I had made the right choice turning away from the door. If only I had confronted him that day. The more the years passed, the less I saw of him. It soon turned to the point I would only see him twice a day. When he came home from work and when he came to retrieve dinner. I always cooked and cleaned the house. I had taken on so many responsibilities on my own by this point. I was 16 and soon found myself not taking any notice of my father's absence. I was well acquainted with it by now anyway. I had soon forgotten everything I once knew of that man, to be frank. I barely even remembered his name. He no longer was my father in my eyes. Everything seemed normal, till the days came when I wasn't seeing that man anymore. But this had sometimes happened before. He was so set on remaining in the attic that he wouldn't even come down for dinner. 5 days had been without me seeing my father. I wanted to ignore this fact, but I couldn't any longer. I know that man had told me to stay away from the attic, but I needed to know. I had to know if he has been in the attic this whole time. If he was, what the hell was he doing in there, without food or water? At this point, I finally had enough of that damn attic. It was consuming my father's entire existence. I wanted to free him from it. I told myself when I came down from the attic with him, I was going to have a serious conversation with him. We needed to move out of there. With my mind now set on my decision, I made my way through the house. Up to the stairs to the second floor, down the hall, past the bathroom and the 2 bedrooms. To the door at the end of the hallway, and through that door would lead me to the attic stairs. The stairs were creaky as usual as I went up to them. The spiral of the stairs often messed with my focus as I went up to them, for a strange reason. After what seemed like forever going up the stairs, I would finally arrive at the door of the attic. Bottles littered the front door like usual, so I would kick them out of the way before making an attempt to open the door. It felt weird at first, trying to open the door. A feeling began to arise in me that I shouldn't go through the door, but nevertheless, I forced myself to open the door. Opening that door, an awful stench began to flood me. I never smelled something so awful before. This smell, though, was familiar to me. It was a stench of death. Years ago, I needed to visit our neighbor. She was an elderly kind of woman, and no one had seen her for 2 weeks. She hadn't gone to pick up her mail for some time, and so I decided to personally deliver it to her. But when I got to her house, what I found was the door open. She had been brutally murdered, and lying next to her was her son. He ended his own life. The police had come to the conclusion the son must have killed his mother and then himself. But no one ever knew why he did such a thing. That smell haunted me for months after the incident, and now here it was again. But there was another horrid smell. It was as if someone with a horrible body odor had thrown up all over themselves and didn't bother to clean it up. It smelled as if the sun baked on them, making the smell stronger and even worse. I would scrunch up my nose and cover it with my hand as I stood there at the attic door. I didn't want to go in there because of the smell, but I knew I had no choice but to do so. After a deep breath, I would enter the attic. The room was smaller than I had remembered. The walls were grey paint that seemed to be chipping off of the wall already. There was a dimly lit hanging light from the ceiling of the attic. The roof met at a point in the center of the room and was pointed at an angle. A desk sat in the middle of the space. Boxes scattered around it, and papers littered all over the desk, with a chair sitting by the desk. Though half of the room was hidden by a huge black blanket that hung in the middle of the room, blocking my vision to seeing the other part of the room. I knew it then. That's where the stench must have been coming from. As I began to make my way to the blanket, I stopped and looked to the desk. The paper sitting there, it was calling to my attention. I decided I was more curious about the papers to ignore the stench for a moment longer. Going up to the desk, I found my father's phone sitting there. He had several missed calls from his boss. This was clear enough to me that my father hadn't gone to work, so that smell must be... I decided to put that thought to the side and began looking through the papers. When I first started reading the papers, I found myself intrigued by what he must have been researching. Each paper had what must have been long hours of research my father wrote down to keep track of. He was doing a series of tests on a subject he was working with. So many papers filled with his personal notes or written pieces of messages to himself, almost as if he was trying to keep up writing a journal. As I read, I found what seemed to be the first page of his research. I was simply skimming through it till my eyes fell upon a word. A name, to be more specific. My mother's name. My heart sank. Why was she written down in the notes? I decided to read them. I didn't care how long it would take. I needed to read them. Just as I began to, I heard a sound coming from behind the blanket. I stopped and turned to look. Dad? Is that you? I couldn't help but ask. Maybe the research papers weren't that important. Maybe seeing where that smell was coming from was much more important. Change of plans. Investigate that smell. So I did. I made my way to the blanket, and through the cracks between where the blanket met the ground, I saw a shadow move. It must have been my dad. Dad, I know it's you that's behind the blanket. I'm sorry. I know you didn't want me to come up here, but I've been worried. I haven't been seeing you, I was saying to him. At this point, I was standing at the blanket. I was scared for a moment, but my fear went away when I heard footsteps. It had to be my dad behind there. I moved the blanket out of my way and dug under it, making my way into the other half of the attic. And once I was there, looking up, what I saw standing before me destroyed my mind and soul. I wanted to scream. I felt my body go cold, and the disgusting smell became so unbearable, my eyes started to water. I covered my mouth and held my breath. "Oh my God, what the hell are you?" was all I could say. The disgusting monstrosity that stared back at me. Its upper body was so large it was unbelievable how its skinny legs were supporting its weight. It was as if all of its weight went up to its face, stomach, and arms. Its skin was a disgusting green color and it was breathing heavily. It had a human face. Such thin hair that was a mess. It was only strands of hair that seemed to be left on its head, like it was balding. It was struggling to stand up, swaying back and forth, constantly making steps to keep its balance. The creature was naked and had a body of a woman. Rolls of fat and flesh gave it such a disgusting look. An eye was missing and the other one was stitched wide open, forcing it to never blink. That eye must have been like that for forever, for it seemed the thing was now blind. It was making grunting noises before it mustered out a word. "My baby," it said. That voice, it couldn't be. Its mouth moved so unnatural, like it wasn't actually speaking, just trying to mouth the words that were playing in the background. My blood ran cold. After all these years, I still remember her damn voice. It was my mother standing there. Her face soon became recognizable from the parts of her face that even looked human still. I was so caught up in staring at her, I didn't even notice my father's body. He was hung from the ceiling, his body part hanging from the limbs just barely. She must have killed him. I felt the blood drain from my face and my mouth became ajar as I tried to scream. Nothing came out. The disgusting creature began making her way towards me. Its footsteps were heavy. I didn't know how to react. All I could do was run. That thing chasing after me. "Come here, my baby. Why are you running from me, honey? Mommy wants to give you a kiss," it said to me. I just ran. Ran as fast as I could to get out of that house. It chased me out of the house all the way down the street. The neighbor walking saw it and tried to protect me, grabbing me and pulling me inside his home. She didn't like that. She grabbed him and mauled him, ripped him apart like he was nothing. All I could do was scream and beg for help. Luckily, another neighbor came to my aid. We called the police, they didn't come. Instead, the FBI showed up. They took her away, they told me I wasn't supposed to say anything. But how can I not? My mind is tortured every day. The images of my mother, of how I used to remember her, and what she became conflicted with one another. My mind is staring at the seams. I'm living in insanity. They said I took away my mother to put her out of her misery. I know they lied. I see her watching me from outside my window. All my friends gone missing once they left my home. The FBI lost her and aren't doing anything about it. No one is safe. You have no idea who I am. Maybe I'm the friend who refuses to let you come over. Makes up an excuse after an excuse. If you come over, you'll disappear too. Because she protects me. Because she loves me.
I've been a widower for exactly 6 years now. I was blissfully married to a woman named Ava for 15 amazing years. We didn't have much in the beginning, but we were happy that way. She always said she'd rather struggle with a man that she was truly in love with than to have luxury with a man she didn't. Ava was good to me that way, never made me feel bad about anything. Anyway, 6 years ago today, she was taken from me. It was February 14th. I wasn't feeling well and she had gone to the natural food market to get me some tea. Ava always made tea when I was sick, pampered me just like a loving mother would. She was just going down one of the aisles, and then all of a sudden, her life snuffed out like a candle's flame. My wife just dropped dead right there in the spices section, 34 years old. She was healthier than I was. But just like that, one brain hemorrhage later, and she was gone forever. I've tried to make it on my own, but I can't. Food has no taste, and sleep provides no rest, not without my Ava. I've prayed to heaven, and I've prayed to anyone who could bring her back. Finally, I resigned myself to the wonders of the internet. After days of searching, I finally find something, a kind of ritual. I've nothing to lose. In worst case scenario, nothing happens other than I've wasted some time and money. The items are collected, and the ritual performed, but I feel no different afterwards. still just exhausted in every way one's spirit can be. Trying not to get my hopes up, I go to bed. After a fitful sleep, a cold, empty bed greets me in the morning. I guess I really don't expect much different. Refusing to succumb to my dejection, I surrender myself to my daily routine. I drive to the store to buy some food for the dog and a pack of smokes. It was the only thing I wasn't able to do when Ava was alive. She hated smoking, especially the smell on my breath. The day was gorgeous, but felt heavy to me for some reason. I guess everything feels heavy these days. When your only purpose for the last 15 years was to make someone else happy, what do you do with yourself now that that purpose is gone? Halfway through the day, the door makes a strange squeak as I hear it open. I descended the stairs, confused but hopeful. There she is, my beautiful Ava. She looks amazing. Younger than she did when she died, if you can believe that. She places a bag of groceries down on the counter and takes out a box of tea. Babe, what happened to the car? I drove it to the store, but when I came out, it was gone. I had to call one of those Uber things. I got your tea, by the way. She kisses my cheek and pauses. Hey, Maddie, did you do something different with the house? It looks so gloomy in here. Open some of the windows up, come on, let some light in. Wait, were you smoking? Yeah, open the door but leave the screen closed. She flirtatiously glares at me, then proceeds to walk about the house, cleaning and arranging like no years have passed at all. Cautiously, I walk up to her and touch her face, halfway expecting my hand to pass right through her. It doesn't, though. Her warm face nuzzles into the groove of my hand and her eyes close, absorbing the love of my touch. I hug her fiercely, like I haven't in years, literally. I can't stop staring at her. My heart is so caught up in the relief from its torment that I can't bring myself to question everything now. Let me enjoy this first. Doubt can come tomorrow. 12 hours have gone and suddenly Ava screams. Her bones contort and her eyes freeze over. She clutches her heart and drops off the bed and hits the ground. I faint, wake up, and it's morning again. Ava is laying there on her side, smiling at me, with no recollection of the night before. After this occurred, I rushed her to the doctor, explaining what I saw the previous night. Both stare at me with bewildered faces. Ava swears to him that she feels fine, and suggests that maybe I'm the one who needs to be checked out, as if this was the time for jokes. I watched her die. After everything comes back normal, he sends us home, but not before giving me a list of recommended therapists that accept our insurance. The rest of the week continues. Other than being a little more withdrawn due to plaguing images of a dying wife, things are great. I started to enjoy her more and more, my suspicions shrinking smaller and smaller every day that went by. After all, this is what I prayed for. She's back in my life. She didn't come back a rotted corpse. She's not full of evil, carried over from the other side. She's just my Ava. It was exactly 1 week to the day that she returned when I'm robbed of my security. The catch to my bargain was like the hand of death, gripping at my throat. We're out driving and decide to pull over and go for a walk. The sky is just beginning to fill with the colors of the fading sun. Ava drops her phone on the sidewalk. When I bend to retrieve it, she moves over to allow me room to do so. Just then a truck swerves to avoid something large in the roadway and Ava's hit. I see the beautiful blue of her eyes get lighter and lighter as her life fades away. The crimson pool surrounding her blends in with her auburn hair. I call for an ambulance and hold my love as I wait for help, even though I know there is none. Nothing can help her now but the sweet release of the afterlife. They take her away and I sob hard. You would think the agony of seeing my wife die for the third time would take on an almost surreal kind of element to it. However, it becomes more and more devastating each time it happens. Am I in hell? It feels that way, but I haven't really done anything in my life to deserve such a fate. Nothing to mention I'm most definitely sure I'm not dead. My pounding headaches and constant sweat-stained nightmares make me sure of that. I awake the next morning once again to the chill of a cold, empty bed. This time, though, I smell bacon. I can hear Ava's loving voice singing from the kitchen. As much as I want to rush to her and hold her, I cannot move. My mind has a moment of true insanity, like the kind where you don't know if you're in a dream or if you keep dreaming about waking up from a dream, but you're in another dream. It's madness. My mind shuts down as I struggle to sort out reality from this alternative. I continue to lay there motionless in a pool of sickly sweet smelling sweat. Week after week she leaves me, all in different ways. It seems like the more I try to keep her safe, the more violent her deaths become. She chokes on a homemade dinner I made for her the first week of September. She's struck down by a seizure that causes cardiac arrest the middle week of October. The 3rd of December, I thought I finally beat it. She lays down next to me and just falls asleep. No blood, no screams, no demons taking over her body movements. Just sleep. I leave to take some medicine, and when I come back, she is still there. I get so excited, I actually jump up and down with joy until I see her eyes open. They are fixed in a lifeless 1,000-yard stare, the irises almost a blue-white. Again, she is gone. So I lay there and hold her body until the morning breathed life back into it. I know the marble cold skin will be replaced by warm, breathing silk by the time I wake. Admittedly, after the 16th week in a fit of insanity, I kill her myself, in the most respectful, loving way possible, if there even is such a thing. The look in her eyes as she realizes what I've done was worse than any death I had seen thus far. I think that look will stick with me the most. I see it in her smile, in the way that she cries at something beautiful. I just wanted to change it, break the cycle. I'd try anything, but she would die, and then be vibrant and beautiful the next morning like nothing happened, over and over again. The cliched phrase, "careful what you wish for," plays through my brain like a broken record. You tell me, is it worth it? Would you be able to handle the mental anguish over and over again just to have one more day? The same day with different events, all leading to the one you love's death. It's been almost a year now since it started, and I'm rapidly losing my mind. How many times do I have to watch this? As if one didn't burn into my every thought. It will always be the last thing I see before I go to sleep, and the first thing I think about in the morning. Her image is perverting to me. Her eyes are starting to look the same alive as they do when she's dead.
It all started with I checked my phone to see the notification. Your package is arriving today. I stared at it, confused. I hadn't ordered anything off of Amazon recently. In fact, I thought I'd uninstalled the app from my phone in an attempt to save myself from 1 a.m. impulse buys of weird kitchen gadgets I didn't need. "Hey, Ben," I said. "Did you buy something off Amazon?" Yeah, socks, a colander, and what was it? Oh, those little rings that hold up the shower curtains, the ones with the metal beads on them." "No, that was last week. I'm talking about today. There's a package arriving." He furrowed his eyebrows. "Oh, no, I didn't order anything since then. Did you?" "No, that's why I'm asking you." He frowned. "Maybe Alexa ordered something by mistake." "Does that happen?" "Yeah, a lot of people complain about it online." Of course, another way for Amazon to reel in money, by making mistake orders. Whoops, you just spent $102 on a new stainless steel frying pan. With a huff, I pulled out my computer. I went to Amazon, clicked orders. There it was, an item, ordered only a few days ago. But the product image was replaced with the standard gray text. No image available. The price box read $0.00. The title of the product read, "Unknown." Underneath, in green bold letters, it read, "Arriving today by 8 p.m. "Hey, Ben, come look at this." His eyes glanced over the computer screen. Oh, that's weird. Probably just a glitch. He looked at me, and I must have looked pretty upset because he added, I honestly wouldn't worry about it, Ellie. I waited for the doorbell to ring. Every time I heard the slightest thump or scuffing sound outside, I jumped and peered out the window to see if the package had arrived. But the afternoon passed without event. As the time approached 8 p.m., and the package still hadn't arrived, I felt both disappointment and relief. I'd been excited to see what the mystery package was, but also a bit freaked out over what appeared to be some sort of phantom Amazon order. But I guess it was a glitch. There never was any package that would be delivered. It was just an error in the system. Then, at 7:46 p.m., my phone dinged. Your package has arrived. I jumped off the couch and ran to the door, as fast as my feet would take me. You okay, Ellie? Ben called, holding a cold slice of pizza. The package is here. Oh, he said, through a mouthful of congealed cheese. I thought it was just a digital glitch, but hey, if they actually sent us a package we didn't pay for, awesome for us, it's free stuff. It's not awesome. It's weird. He followed me up to the door, practically dancing. My hand fell on the knob, shaking. I shouldn't be nervous, I scolded myself. Mail mix-ups happen all the time. Ben's right. This is good. It's free stuff, and free stuff is always good. I yanked the door open. There it was, a brown box, about a foot on each side, sealed shut with blue tape. I bent over and picked it up. It was much heavier than I expected. Here, I'll take it, Ben said. We brought it into the kitchen and set it down on the island. He grabbed a butter knife. You ready? He asked. I guess. He plunged it through the tape and pulled open the flaps. What the hell? He said, backing away from it. It was empty. I was staring at ordinary cardboard, slightly frayed and bent in places, held together with that blue tape. I circled around the island, staring inside, as if something might suddenly materialize out of thin air. But it was so heavy, I finally said. How could it be empty? I thought it was going to be something really good, like a boombox, Ben replied. A boombox? What is this, the 90s? He laughed. Hey, I would have been happy. He disappeared back into the living room. I grabbed the box and lifted it. It was light now. Normal. As my heart slowed, I folded the box up and tossed it in the recycling bin. All that fuss over an empty box. I woke up cold. I squinted at the clock. 3:34 a.m. The window was wide open, curtains billowing in the breeze. Damn it, I said, rushing up to close it. That's when I noticed the bed was empty. Ben, I whispered. I glanced at the bathroom. The light was off. The bedroom door hung wide open though, and a dim golden light shone across the stairs. He was downstairs. I walked into the hallway. It was even colder out here. I whipped around and noticed every bedroom door was open, and inside each, every window was open. What kind of fuckery is Ben up to? Ben! I shouted. No reply. I sighed and started down the stairs. As I descended, I started to hear it. A repeated, metallic noise throbbing in my ears like a heartbeat. Damn it, Ben! I called loudly. What the hell are you? I froze. Ben was standing at the kitchen island, hunched over something, He didn't look up at me. His arm just moved back and forth, almost mechanically. He was sharpening knives. Every single knife we owned was divided into 2 piles on either side of him. He pulled that knife out of the sharpener and placed it in the right pile with the metallic clang. Then he picked up the next one, a 12-inch long chef's knife, and began sharpening that. And then I stopped. I ducked behind the wall, holding my hand over my mouth. "Ellie?" He called from the kitchen. My lungs felt like they were about to burst. "I have something to show you," he said. His voice was flat, almost monotone. His bare feet slapped against the tile, slowly, heavily, as he walked towards me. I took in a slow, shuddering breath, extended my foot out in front of me, silently. "Ellie?" I ran. I took off down the hall. My feet slipped against the linoleum, but I forced myself forward, lungs burning. "Ellie!" he screamed. His voice was no longer light and kind. It was angry. I grabbed the keys off the hook. Then I opened the garage and ran out into the driveway. His hulking form was silhouetted in the doorway, the knife gripped tightly in his hand. I dove into the car, locked the doors and started it up. The headlights washed over him, and his eyes glinted eerily in the light. For a moment he was still. Then he ran towards the car, as fast as he possibly could, knife raised in his hand, mouth open in an animalistic howl. I peeled out of the driveway. My mind raced. Ben had never been violent. Never. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Somehow, he was innocent, and I let my fears get the worst of me. I knew it was impossible, that there was no explanation. I just didn't want to accept it. It wasn't until I pulled into the police station that I remembered the empty package. So heavy when we lifted it from the doorstep. So light after Ben opened it. Maybe the box wasn't empty after all. Maybe there was something inside. Something we couldn't see. And we just let it free.